our LATAM offices and our European offices on like having conversations about racism and classism and things like that. So really forced Google to have those kind of uncomfortable conversations, but working to make that atmosphere, that environment more inclusive. And so that's also been kind of what led me to Peloton. Now looking at making fitness more inclusive and accessible, I really wanted to move to that team to be still working on their Google Ads accounts, but also gave me some opportunities to really disrupt a space that typically hasn't served Black communities as well as they should. So really excited to see the impact I can have there. But yeah, I'm going to stop now, stop rambling, and answer any questions you all have.
That was really interesting to hear how you use media and technology as a way to like educate and teach people, make people more aware of things. Peloton especially, I thought that was really cool that you're kind of like disrupting a space to create change. So I feel like you answered like a lot of the questions I asked before, but we talked a little bit about the at the beginning before everyone joined about the pandemic. So how has your industry or your field changed since the pandemic?
Yeah, I think my industry, like my role, what I do, what I was doing at Google, I actually just switched to Peloton this month, but what I was doing at Google really hadn't changed just because, and I think this is really interesting, the future of working remotely. I think that's what's changed is before at Google, a lot of the times people were begging to work remote. Like people wanted, we had Flex Fridays where you could work from home. People love working from home. But a lot of companies had a lot of pushback of, will you still be as productive working from home? And now we've kind of proven we can be productive working remotely. So my day-to-day didn't really change, but I think the environment I was in did change. And I also think what changed is a lot of times I worked with a lot of small businesses, a lot of mom and pop shops that really had to pivot during COVID. Like a lot of like my restaurants, they didn't have an online presence, and we saw it's so important to have like maybe your Google Ads account up to date so you can see what hours you're open or like what even your menu is. So I think what changed is kind of pushing my clients to think more like digital first, which was a mindset shift for a lot of small businesses, just because a lot of them don't have time or the resources to do that. So really actually helping clients shift, going from just helping them with Google Ads to like shifting their entire marketing strategy, or like sometimes pivoting their whole business model is what changed. And then I also changed jobs during the pandemic as well. So my like whole career has changed now, but on the Peloton side, it's still the same thing. Like I'm able to do my job completely remotely. But I think people are just realizing that everyone's working style is very different. And sometimes like this works best for people. So I think now I'm interested to see what happens in a post-COVID environment on what happens with like those hybrid models or people working solely remotely and how that changes like office culture or school culture, honestly, too. Because I heard about like some schools are talking about not doing snow days anymore because of remote days. So yeah.
Yeah. We have about time for one more question, but one of my questions is a lot of your work has to do with like social impact and using technology. So what's one way that you've seen like technology have a really strong impact on like a social issue or something dealing with social justice?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just how you can get broad awareness of a topic for free, for relatively free now. You don't have to pay for, or even just cheaper. Like before, if you wanted to get a message out, you needed to do a big TV buy, you needed to get a billboard. That costs millions and millions of dollars. Things like YouTube, you can upload a YouTube video for free and or on Instagram or things like that. Those are relatively free platforms. They're not always free, but especially if you want to advertise something, but it's pretty easy to get started. There's no really big barriers for entry. So I think it's really helped a lot of organizers and activists get their message out in a way, like on massive scale for relatively cheap. So I think the awareness piece, technology has really helped in that sense. And we saw that for better or for worse this summer. Like you have great examples of like Black Lives Matter really leveraging social media, but you also have examples of people posting black squares and drowning out messages of activists. So I think you have to be very careful with it, but I think that's been the thing that's helped the most is just you can get a lot of reach for very little resources.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sydney. All right, Sydney's gonna take it real quick.
I was on mute. Okay, thank you, Interrux. Next we have Justin Edge. Justin Edge is a certified and passionate senior digital product owner with over 14 years of extensive agile digital commercial products and content experience through years working for very well-known Australian media and publishing brands, including KidSpot, News Life Media, Vivo, Mazda Australia, RACV, and Seek Pty. Delivering apps, chatbot / conversational design systems, and web platforms. Originally from Detroit, graduating from Cranbrook in 2001 and earning a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan and the University of Melbourne, Justin has lived in Australia for almost 16 years. While tech is his profession, he's also a comedian and about to embark on a bee passion, barbering. He's here today to offer advice and answer questions with truth, humor, and honesty. Welcome, Justin Edge.
Hey, everybody. I guess I'll do a bit more on the background of the introduction. Thanks for the introduction. Yes, I've graduated from Cranbrook 01, originally from Detroit. I went to Hampton Elementary School, Halley Magna Middle School, went to Cass Tech for 1 year. I was a Horizons Upward Bound student and got a full scholarship in about 1998. My second year of high school. And Cranbrook was a great experience. There were times where I didn't enjoy it. I think everyone had those times in high school. I kind of started Cranbrook. I was quite shy, hadn't really experienced anything outside of Detroit, and hadn't really been exposed to much outside of my bubble. Cranbrook changed that, and it kind of allowed me to, as someone said before, gave me the willingness to try new things, took me outside of my box. And part of the reason I was able to kind of easily transition to living in a new country was because of Cranbrook and what it exposed me to. Definitely miss living in America, miss my family. It's great seeing all the wonderful things everyone's doing here. My career kind of started in digital, working for a couple of different startups in an analyst product management space. Did quite a bit of strategy and commercializing smaller products, by products like different websites, apps. And that's kind of been my technical profession, my profession. But on the side, I've worked in music, hosted a radio show, and do stand-up comedy, write comedy as well. And to kind of find a way to that, I just want to kind of say today is that you can have what you do for work, but you can also do things outside of that to kind of fill that other need within you. I think one of the big things I've learned this year, working from home for the last, what has been 12 months, 10 months now, is that, you just follow your passion, do what makes you happy. It's never too late to change careers. Decided that I wanted to kind of become a barber. So I want to start studying barbering next year while working full time. And within the next 5 years, my idea is to open up my own barbershop. But I want to use what I've learned in working in product, strategy, agile space, and apply that to something that I'm quite passionate about. I think that's a very succinct way to give you an update of where I am today. Yeah, been in Australia for 16 years is the other part. Any questions or?
Yes. So one question is, so first off, thank you, because I know you're in Australia and the time zone is just completely just flipped backwards. But how did you end up in Australia? What about Australia compelled you to move there?
To be honest, being young, I was at the University of Michigan and I was studying, and I did a study abroad program here for about a year. And it was at the same time where everyone's kind of deciding. Usually, I think it's quite different here because the city you go to university in, uni is what they call college here. College, same thing. College is actually, high school here is called college, which is sometimes really confusing when you're chatting. I was at that stage. I was like, you know what? I love it here. There's opportunity here. And I winded up my first couple of days after I finished my program at Melbourne Uni, I got a job at a startup. And the CEO at that time saw something in me and just kind of decided to develop me, get me into training, got me into like Google programming, did things with like getting certified in different areas of like product strategy, product management, and product ownership as well. And so I had someone investing in me, and it was the right time in my career. I think right now I'm 37, and if I kind of can't, it's really much of a whim, to be honest. Right now, I'd probably put more thinking about moving countries, but back at that stage, it felt like the right thing to do. And I'm happy I did it because I've had some wonderful experiences here. My entire career has been in Australia. So it's really kind of interesting and fascinating to hear about what's happening in the States as well. But yeah, it's like, I wish I was some kind of like grand plan, but it was really like, okay, yep, I just graduated from university. What do I want to do next? As you do when you're 21.
So it seems like you've gone to like different industries, and I know like we're all in high school, so a lot of us are kind of in search of what we want to do. I know some of us are going through the college process, but have you seen like a common thread in like all that you've done, and what is your advice for people that are still in search of what they want to do?
I think, yeah, like in terms of what I've done, the main thing, the common theme, I guess, would say, like I've always worked in technology, and I've tried to find a way to like also be able to honor my passions, which is I'm more of a creative person. And that's not something you can always do within tech, but you also can, because if you're designing a new product or you're working on something, you can add little flourishes of what makes you happy outside of that. I think in terms of trying to, if you're unsure, like I think as you get older, and this is something I never thought was true until as I got older, that you're still trying to discover who you are. You're still evolving. You're still figuring out what you want to do. The next day is completely different than the previous. So it's just a matter of like just being really understanding like what makes you happy. Is it studying for your university? Is it kind of like taking a year off and figuring out, oh, I want to do this and travel a little bit? And then kind of going to your next step. Like I said, I'm 37 and I'm going to start studying to be a barber next year. Something I never thought I'd ever in my life be able to do. But it's a matter of having a conversation with myself and figuring what makes me happy now and just following that. It's never too late to follow your dream. I know that sounds kind of cliche-ish, but you're always evolving, you're always changing, and it's okay to not know what you want to do, but just be true to yourself. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So another one is, because you're like in the tech world, what would you say is the greatest advancement in like the tech world that you've seen? And do you see yourself using technology in your barber endeavors?
Yeah, that's a good, okay, yeah, I'll answer the first one. That's a really good question though. Answer the first question. I think the biggest, since I've started working, so this is probably 2006, and when I worked at KidSpot, which is my first job out of, which is like a parenting website, parenting vertical that did things like recipes, activities. We developed apps for like pregnancy, so ovulation, all that stuff. So a huge gamut of work. One of the things that wasn't huge, and I think was probably it had the biggest impact on that industry, was social media. I initially, in order to get traffic back to the site, the biggest thing was kind of using Google Pay search. But then social media became another way to how do you manage your brand across things like Instagram, across Twitter, across Facebook, across LinkedIn, and how to manage that conversation, because everything's quite different. That's probably the biggest advancement from at that time seeing my career evolve. The other thing that I'm really interested in now is AI and how we're able to how that's going to play out in the space, especially in such like just kind of like implicit biases and who's actually defining what AI is and how conversations happen and algorithms. So I think that's the next big thing.
Okay, we have time for one more question before we go to the next panelist. But like I know in the tech industry, there's a movie called like The Social Dilemma, which talks about like the positives and negatives of social media. So have you seen like any negatives on the social media or technology side that you've witnessed through your work?
Yes, I think from a both personal and work perspective, I think that social media, while I think it's great, it allows me to like have these conversations with you guys and even find out about it in the first place. But what it does, it creates a bubble that it's hard to get out of, because they want to kind of showcase the content that they think you're interested in. While in one case, I love it because I'm able to see what I want to see, but what it does is completely takes away from what's actually happening in the real world. And in terms of the workspace, I think the negative is just how to, if you're a brand and someone's kind of like saying things about you on Twitter or on Instagram or Facebook, you can't manage that. So how do you continue to have the conversation and let it take place and have it go in a positive way? And how do you kind of manage? I think that's the biggest thing for brands going forward is how do you allow the conversation to take place in the social media space, but do it in a way where it doesn't tarnish your brand. Like, do you control it? Do you just let it happen? Do you turn off comments when it happens? And is that damaging to a brand? Would be one of the biggest things that brands have to deal with today.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Cool. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Justin Edge. Next we have Matthew Montgomery. Matthew Montgomery, DO, MBA, MBH, is an interventional heart failure cardiologist specializing in advanced heart failure treatment, mechanical circulatory support, health transplantation, and coronary interventions. He completed fellowships in advanced heart failure and transplantation at Newark Beth Israel Medical Center, interventional and general cardiology at Deborah Heart and Lung Center, and internal medicine residency training at Jefferson Health System in Philadelphia. He completed his medical education at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and he also holds a master's of public health from Yale School of Public Health and a master's of business administration from St. Joseph's University. He is board certified in internal medicine and cardiovascular disease and currently practices in Newark, New Jersey. Welcome, Matthew Montgomery.
I'm sorry, let me unmute myself here. Hey, good evening, everyone. How is everybody doing? Glad to be here and share my story on my time at Cranbrook and answer any questions anybody has about all that. That was a mouthful, but essentially just means that, like Trooper said, that we're extremely old and we've been kind of in school and been, just living life and trying to better ourselves throughout this whole process. So I don't know, should I just give a spill or you want to start with questions or?
I can ask a question. Also, just to remind you guys, feel free to ask questions in the chat. I just typed it in there, but don't be afraid to say something. So my first question is, so you're in the medical field and I just want to know, how has the pandemic impacted your work?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I'm a specialist. So I specialize in advanced heart failure, cardiac transplantation, interventional cardiology. So a lot of the patients that I see have, really bad chronic disease, and they're coming to me specifically for the specialized care that we deliver. And so in the pandemic, basically everything in the world, not only in the world, but also in medicine, pretty much has stopped. And so pretty much everything is focused. Like my hospital has about 600 beds. At the height of the COVID experience or the COVID pandemic back in March, about 500 of them were filled with COVID patients. We had patients that were in the hallways. We had patients that were in the ER. We had patients that were even outside in different creating makeshifts, hospital rooms. And so it was, you could say it was a TV show, but it was a real life. And so it was extremely difficult to kind of manage. And so a lot of what I did as a specialist caring for patients, kind of came to a halt. One of the things that I do is taking care of patients that come in with acute heart attacks and taking them to the cath lab and implanting stents in their coronary arteries. And that volume stopped, probably about 70 or 80%. So you have to ask yourself, what are these patients doing? Where are they going? A lot of them are just staying at home. They're not even coming to the hospital. A lot of them may have, came to the hospital, but when they did, they were, either not diagnosed with COVID or they were, but most of the resources and everything else was centered towards the pandemic. So I would say that the biggest change has been, pretty much everybody is pitching in, and it's like one, like a big team from everyone, from all of the specialists, all of the, primary care doctors and everyone else. Everybody is trying to fill their part and really trying to be involved in fighting this disease, which has taken hold of us in our society.
Gotcha. Thank you. So I was supposed to ask this before that, but can you tell us a little bit about your Cranbrook story? How, like, what made you come to Cranbrook?
Yeah, so I will say that my Cranbrook story is probably, well, my Cranbrook story I know is a complicated one. I will say that I think I'm the only panelist on here tonight that is not a Cranbrook alum. I attended Cranbrook from 95 through 98, from my freshman through my junior year. And Cranbrook is complicated. It exposed me to a lot of, I grew up in Southfield, and it exposed me to kind of like the real world, you know, from an academic standpoint, a social standpoint, administrative standpoint. And I had like a lot of impact and a lot of interaction with a lot of the administration and a lot of the community when it was there. Overall, when I look back at my experience, I think that what I value most is really my interactions and my friendships that I developed while I was there. You know, I was not allowed to finish my senior year due to a number of different things. It was a complicated story that, you know, I can get into later on or now if it's suitable. But I will say that it's dealing more largely with money and perception. And so I was not allowed to finish my senior year while I was there. So I did go on and complete my senior year well into the after academic year had started at another school. But regardless of all of that, you know, I met a lot of good people and a lot of good friends while I was there that I still even have and cherish to this day. And really, to be honest, 4A was a very good refuge while I was there. And really, I really loved what it stood for when I was on campus and what it represented to the Cranbrook community. And honestly, that's why I'm here tonight, for 4A and for all the students and everyone else, all the members, student members and student non-members that have found it difficult to navigate the Cranbrook community. And just know that high school is not the end of your life.
Thank you. That was a really good message at the end that I need to hear. But my last question, or actually maybe not my last, but so being in the medical field, I know it requires a lot of work, a lot of schooling. I don't think I'm built for it personally, but because it's so much work, I wonder, like, what's your why, or what made you want to become a doctor, and what like pushes you to continue? Because I know it's a lot of work.
That's funny you asked. So I was a student in 6th grade that knew he wanted to be a doctor. My mom actually, when I graduated medical school, she has this plaque when I was in 6th grade where, you know, I had to write on there my name, what my hobbies were, and what I wanted to do when I grew up. And what I wanted to do when I grew up was to be a doctor. And so when I was 6 years old, or when I was in 6th grade, I knew that's what I wanted to do. And so as I got older, I just worked to try and position myself to be in the best position to pursue all of those dreams. And so for me, that meant when I graduated high school, I went to Xavier University of Louisiana, which is #1 for putting Black students in medical school for the past 20 or 25 years. And so for me, getting in Xavier meant I was going to get into medical school. So for me, it was a no-brainer. Plus it was in New Orleans, and that's, you know, a great place to go to college. And so I went down there for that. And after that, I went into medical school in Philadelphia. And once you get into medical school and you really learn the process of how things go, it's a very regimented process. And it's a very kind of planned out process that you already know about before you get there. There's certain milestones and certain things that you have to meet. And so I just kind of followed along that process and, you know, realized I wanted to go into cardiology, discovered, you know, all of the things that I liked about medicine, you know, the aspects that I wanted to do, and how best I wanted to contribute as far as the patient population that I wanted to treat. And for me, it was most important that I knew I wanted to do something that I was going to ultimately make a difference in someone's life. I wanted to be able to take care of patients that were critically ill, because I found myself getting the most satisfaction out of seeing patients essentially on their deathbed or very, very ill, and helping to nurse them and treat them back to health, but also being able to see them in the office out living their best lives and really doing all the things that they ultimately came to me so that they could get back to. And so that was what drove me to kind of get into the very small subsection of the career that I'm in right now. The bridging of the two specialties that I do is an emerging field, and it's something that, you know, very few people in the country really are doing now. It's becoming more popular, but it's something that that I feel lucky to be able to practice.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 1 minute left. We have to move to our next panelist, but there's a question in the chat from Miss Alexa, and it is there a recommendation of where to specifically get started in medicine, or does it depend on the profession, specific profession?
Well, it started in medicine. I'd say that there's a lot of, right now in high school, the best thing that you can do is really just try and seek out someone that you could probably just do some shadowing with. I know when I was in high school, I went and shadowed an emergency room physician, I think my junior year or my senior year. And it was an eye-opening experience. No matter how much you really watch TV or anything else, it's not quite like you see it on TV. And so that's really the best thing you can do, is just try to immerse yourself in the field and try to just get a sense of what it actually is like to practice medicine, and then really see if that's what you want to do. Because a lot of people say that, well, I want to practice medicine or I want to be a doctor, but that is more than a notion to go through all of this training, all of this education. And then even when you are becoming a practicing physician, to, have the type of responsibility and everything that you deal with. And so, like, for example, I've been on call for the last 2 weeks. And so I'm still on call now. It's just it's a different type of life. And you have to know that that's something that you definitely want to live and want to experience. It's definitely not a job. It's more of a calling.
Thank you. That was a really good answer. Sydney is going to transition into our last panelist.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Next up, and lastly, of course, we have Taylor Jamerson. Taylor Jamerson is a graduate of the Cranbrook Kingswood class of 2012. She went on to complete her undergraduate studies at the University of Pennsylvania as a university scholar and earned a degree in biology with honors. She is now a fourth-year medical student at the University of Michigan Medical School and currently taking a year off from her studies to complete a research fellowship at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. Taylor is passionate about mentorship and serving marginalized communities in medicine. She is the co-founder of an initiative at Michigan Medicine and Wayne State University School of Medicine that provides free blood pressure monitors and patient education to communities significantly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, Taylor Jamerson.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's really, really nice to be here tonight and to see a lot of familiar faces. So a little bit about my time at Cranbrook. I was a lifer at Cranbrook, meaning that I completed pre-kindergarten through 12th grade here. So really the core and foundation of who I am as a scholar, I attribute to Cranbrook. And I think now that I'm in the 20th grade, basically, and have attended other educational programs, I'm better able to appreciate the intentionality behind the structure of Cranbrook's curriculum. And when I was selecting colleges to apply to, I was unconsciously looking for a reflection of Cranbrook in these programs. And just a little bit about my journey into medicine. So I started to really take my studies more seriously around 8th grade. And I remember particularly loving my math and science classes above others. And my science teacher at the time recognized this and told me about a summer program at the University of Michigan called WISE, which stands for Women in Science and Engineering. And she wrote me a letter of recommendation for this program, and I was accepted into it. And it was such an incredible experience that confirmed the interest that I had in medicine, in science, and in discovery. And so from there, I really committed myself to participating in more summer exposure programs. So my sophomore year of high school, I participated in a health careers program at Dartmouth for 2 weeks and had the opportunity to live in the dorms, attend lectures, and spend time in the medical school. And then the following summer, I participated in a biomedical research program for underrepresented students through the National Institutes of Health with one of my classmates actually from Cranbrook. And we were able to present our research in Bethesda, Maryland at the main campus of the NIH and meet like other researchers and scientists there. And then following this program, I was able to dedicate my senior May time to further developing my research. And I first authored my first paper, which is a big milestone in medicine during that time. And I really think senior May was just like a beautiful opportunity to continue making connections in medicine that have been able to serve me in so many ways down the line, and it's a pretty big factor in how I ended up at Michigan for medical school, actually. So that's kind of like a little background of me at Cranbrook, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so we have a question in the chat. I'm going to ask one question before that. So I asked Mr. Montgomery this too, about being in the medical field, but I think it was a little bit about like your passion for marginalized communities, and there's a need for Black women specifically like in the medical area. And so I wanted to ask you, like, what is your why for being in the medical field and for the path that you're taking?
Yeah, so my why I think has to do a lot with like my family's personal experiences with medicine and the medical field. So, you know, a lot of my family members were very mistrustful of the medical system. I'm actually very fortunate that both of my parents are in medicine. And so I think like when it comes to any sort of medical conditions that any of our family members are dealing with, they always check with my parents to make sure that they're receiving, you know, the adequate care that they deserve. And I think like just seeing this growing up, seeing the mistrust that's specifically within the Black community, and I think it's even very evident now, you know, with COVID vaccines, I wanted to be someone that could, you know, kind of help fill in this gap that exists in medicine, and address a lot of the issues that I think people either aren't aware of or are aware of, but just aren't as dedicated to serving. So that's kind of where my interest in medicine developed.
Thank you. So one question, it is from Mr. Reed, and it says, if you became a teacher at Cranbrook tomorrow, how would you teach your subject area or industry to current CK students? And how would you approach education in a different way relative to how you were taught when you were in high school?
Oh, that's really tricky. So, integrating medicine into high school and teaching. I think early exposure is probably something that I would integrate into teaching in high school. I think a lot of the time people don't get into like probably college or even graduate school until they've had exposure to physicians and being able to shadow and the medical field. And medicine is definitely one of those fields that you have to kind of get your feet wet in and have some experience in early on, because there's a lot that goes into, you know, being able to apply into medical school and so forth. So I think the earlier you can have the exposure and identify interests in medicine, the better off I think the path will be to medicine.
That's a really great question. I mean, so I think there's so many more creative ways now to teach foreign languages than having the textbook and doing the, you know, cases and all that sort of stuff, just because of what's available online and able to tap, you know, foreign media, etc. But I actually think the issue of the connection between the creative subjects and the more traditional academic subjects, it's actually even just been interesting here, but I've been floored as you know, like with friends who I went to school with, how many folks are involved in various creative arts who maybe or have another passion, but there's something creative attached to it. There's something just about the Cranbrook curriculum. And so I think it's how to connect the creative side to people who might want to go into medicine or other fields, so that you really, while you're doing it, you're sort of actually building up that equity in a more, that sort of intellectual equity in a more kind of purposeful way, as opposed to kind of waking up 15 years later like, why are people calling me creative? And I'm like, oh, okay. Because I stumbled through a first period sculpture class for a couple semesters, and weaving with Dean Hazard's mom, who's one of my favorite teachers. That is an enduring memory. I can tell the story of admiring a weaving rug when Michelle Obama came by, and I was so obsessed with it, and she couldn't quite figure out why. And I had to explain Cranbrook and weaving and Mrs. Hazard and the whole thing.
All right, thank you guys for that answer to that really creative question from Mr. Reed. So, Mr. Justin Edge, I want to say thank you for joining us. I don't think he'll be available for the breakout rooms that we're about to do. Is he coming up?
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this. This is great, and it's great to hear how everyone's doing. And any questions, I think my email might be sent around. Feel free to email me. And if anyone's ever in Australia, look me up. I hope to see everyone in America quite soon. I hope. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I think we'll send out his.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so we have one more question in the chat before we go to breakout rooms. Any of the panelists can answer this one. But it says, how did your experience as a student and a Black individual at Cranbrook impact or influence your time in your higher education and career?
That's a good one.
You want me to talk too much? It's like just when I was at Cranbrook, I can talk to. No, go ahead, Matthew. Yes.
I'll start. I'll just say Cranbrook for me, I grew up in Southfield. I went to public school in Southfield. And so Southfield is, predominantly, African-American. And I went to school with, all of my friends were Black when I went to, kindergarten, elementary school, and middle school. And so for me, I honestly didn't even know about Cranbrook when I was there. But my father and my mother said, no, we have to get you out of this environment. And quite honestly, it was probably, to be honest, the best decision that they ever made for me. Because even though, at the time, it was not what I wanted to do, looking back, I think it was the best thing that I actually could have done. And it was probably a T-junction, so to speak, in my life of where things kind of changed from one aspect to another. And so, but in that aspect, I think what it does do is it lets you know how things are in the real world. And it lets you know that it exposes you towards how, just more so how towards things are in the real world, and that everyone is not of the same type of background. There are people of different backgrounds, people of different religions, people of different interests and common goals and things like that. And so these are all things that you have to accept when you get older and live in the real world. So for me, that was a big eye-opening experience.
I think the just extraordinary rigor of Cranbrook, and when you're stumbling around most of the semester dead exhausted because there's so much to do and learn. I just think that ability to kind of just muscle through and almost figure out any subject. I think after Cranbrook, I don't think I've ever been at least intellectually intimidated by anything. Even if I didn't know it, it's like, I'll figure it out and just sort of, and probably some of my, shall we call them, survival study skills from Cranbrook, I still, for better or worse, employ. Last week, I had a live thing like this with my largest donor, who's fairly well known, and it won't surprise Mr. Shaw in here to know that I didn't quite focus on the content of it until about 15 minutes before it was supposed to happen. But I was well practiced at being able to pull it together and get it done.
I can go really quickly. I would say for me, I definitely agree. It taught me that I couldn't learn anything I put my mind to, and definitely those like survival study skills. College was pretty easy for me just because, especially freshman year, just because everything that I feel like I learned freshman year, I learned senior year at Cranbrook. I think another thing that it taught me, it's definitely made me very much more conscious of how I move in the world. Growing up in Detroit, my entire neighborhood was Black. I didn't know that it was different to be Black, and Cranbrook really, for better or for worse, highlighted those things for me. So it definitely showed me how people would perceive me in the world, and how I really, how people just saw me move through the world. So it made me really acknowledge that, but also taught me just going into those areas of higher education, like just the work I would need to do in order to kind of get the things I needed in those environments. I don't think that's necessarily a great thing, but it did prepare me for the real world in that sense of understanding like how I move as a Black woman in this world, and like how people would perceive me. So
that's I just want to piggyback off what Winter said. I feel like I'm on a work call when I say piggyback, but I was going to say that I growing up in Detroit, I wasn't completely aware of me as being a Black man, a Black gay man. And going to Cranbrook kind of like opened my eyes and made me realize that kind of what you said, like, this is how the world is going to see you. So then it allowed me to kind of start thinking, okay, so how do I move through the world? How would I be interpreted? What's a bit more about my Black identity? And that's something that I continue throughout college that I don't think I would have done had I gone to Cranbrook. And I think it's unfortunately something that we still need to consider, being African-American or a person of color, for the foreseeable future. But yeah, just like being exposed to, starting to really understand what does it mean to be a Black gay man in America or around the world.
Yeah. Thank you guys for your really thoughtful answers. We're going to transition into breakout rooms. So each of you guys are made co-hosts. So each of our panelists will be in their own little breakout room. And from there, you guys can ask questions. I know we have some more questions in the chat, but feel free to ask them in the breakout rooms. And yeah, we're going to do that right now for about 10 minutes. And then we're all going to meet back to wrap it up. Okay.
And I was wondering how, well, one, we're already Black, so that's one thing. And then two, being in the community, that's a whole nother struggle. And I was just wondering how you got over the fear of being open with it. Because I find myself, I was in the class my whole life, but now I have a girlfriend, I'm bisexual. And I find myself like not being able to say that I have a girlfriend. Like if it comes up in conversation, like in school areas, like I'll be like my partner, or I'll be very gender neutral because I'm scared of being judged. I don't know how people are going to take it, more so like teachers, because they could have like old-fashioned mindsets. So I was wondering like how you could be openly gay in high school, like how you got over that fear of being judged, I guess, by teachers and stuff like that.
Amari, Mr. Edge had to leave really quickly, but I feel like that was a very specific question for him. But does anyone have anything to say about like being proud in your identity at school or in the different institutions that you're a part of?
Can I connect it maybe a little bit to it's not going to be directly this, and maybe someone can email Justin with that question. He could maybe reply back with a great response. That was a really powerful and thoughtful question, Amari. Thank you for that. But maybe connect it a bit back to the question Bryce put in about the perception, of being an athlete and scholar. And I don't want to minimize this in any of these circumstances, the kind of social dimensions that the outside world presents and the difficulties and barriers. But there's a piece of it that I think just sometimes comes with the resilience of whatever other, parts of your life that others may judge in a certain way is, it's frankly something that comes from Cranbrook. I remember arguing with this about the difference between Cranbrook and maybe folks who may go to less resource schools and communities. It's having a healthy sense of entitlement. And that doesn't mean sort of toxic arrogance or being a bro or things like that, but it is a healthy sense of entitlement that the world, that you have a standard about how the world is going to, that you will be treated. And that may require some confrontation or bringing those who don't meet your standards up to your standards. And that's not easy in many circumstances, but even just having, and frankly, look, I think, if I'm really honest about it, schools like Cranbrook were built and designed and funded to frankly give young people that healthy sense of entitlement in the world. Now there's a question of what you do with that. But it is, there are many complications with being African-American or being LGBTQ or whatever it may be, but that legacy and that the whole point of why Cranbrook Kingswood schools exist is part of your legacy too. Now you want to do something healthy with that, but to know that the world can be shaped in certain ways around how you want it to be, I think is a good thing and part of the armor as you're kind of going in and dealing with the ups and downs of life.
I would just add to that too. I definitely like the idea of like moving through the world in the way you want it to be. I think that's definitely something I wish I would have done more while I was a student at Cranbrook, was speak up more. Like when you see injustices happening, feel that you are empowered to kind of speak up about it. And I know that's really hard, especially when you might feel like you're the only one or you're alone. But I think that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because now, like, if you feel uncomfortable in the space, know that like we all are also here to support you through your like time at Cranbrook. So one thing I would say is don't sweep things under the rug. I think I did that a little bit too much while I was there, and I regret not speaking out or speaking up or just being myself a little bit more while I was there. And then know that if something you don't like something happens while you're there, like definitely rely on this community as well to support you, because we will be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can't believe I'm at the age where I'm comparing generations, but I know it's hard when you're in the middle of it, but just as what am I, Gen X? I guess if you're still at Cranbrook, you're part of the Gen Z. I am just stunned how like bold and tough and strong as a generation Gen Z is about laying out certain expectations and particularly addressing issues around diversity and inclusion. I mean, with a boldness and declarativeness that previous generations, didn't quite have at your age. And so I like sit back, I'm like, oh man, let them lead. We'll just kind of provide a little bit of, cash and every now and then a bit of guidance, but Gen Z doesn't play around. So y'all are amazing.
Hi, I'm not a panelist, but Bryce, I'll just sort of give you just a little bit of word of advice. So I'm actually an alum, and I was class of 1997. And when I was at Cranbrook, I think most people saw me, I was an athlete, and most people saw me as an athlete, and they also saw me mostly as a dancer, not necessarily as an academic. So to you, I think what's important is that you just embrace the gift that you have been given, and just know that you may not be able to change other people's perception of who you are, but just know who you are, for your own self, and just take that gift that you have and just run with it, and just know who you are, because you might not be able to change everyone's idea of that you're an athlete or whatever. You may want people to see you a different way, but I just say, take your talent, go with it, live with it, and you make whatever you become who you want to become. So I'm not in the arts, I'm not a dancer, I work in financial services and payments. So just take it as it, go with the flow, take it as it is, and just be grateful and take it as a true blessing and gift that you have. So that's it.
Hey, I feel compelled to contribute here, and it's really hard for me not to talk sometimes. But as somebody that works in corporate America and also that works in entertainment, what I want to say to you, Kayla, what I want to say to everyone here really is that I think that there is, when you look at people of color in general in this world, there's a way to look at the things that are put in place and look at them as possible hindrances, but there are people that actually go out to try to figure out ways to motivate themselves to do something special. They struggle with the idea of motivation. I think as people of color, we have a lot of that innately, and these things that make us different, the boxes they try to put us in, it's up to us to determine if we let that constrict us or not. In most cases, these are things that are going to separate you from people. The fact that they can't completely understand exactly everything about you is a credit to you. And I think as thinkers and as critical problem solvers, one of the things that you do is you figure out, how do I leverage the things that I learned from this space into this space? And if you can figure that out, that will give you a strategic advantage versus anybody else in your field. There's something special about tapping into these things and figuring out how to make it work in other parts of your profession. So I'll say that.
Thank you so much. We have, okay, so we have to wrap it up soon, but I know like in the breakout rooms, there would have been opportunities to get to have like better, like more in-depth and intimate conversations with you all. And for some of you, I think we'll probably contact you guys afterwards if we can connect you guys to some students and maybe even find people senior May opportunities. But for right now, I'm going to switch it over to Mr. Daniel Jefferson. He is the founder of Blackbrook, so he's going to give us some words right before Brandon McCaskill.
Okay, I'm going to give you some words. Okay, so not only am I the founder of Blackbrook, and I'll explain to you what that is, but I am also a former president of the Fourier, which I'm very proud of, and 91, 92. And it was my first opportunity to show leadership. So I have a very strong connection with the Fourier. So what is Blackbrook? Blackbrook was started in 2003. So that's roughly about 17 years ago. And I came up with it because I wanted to come up with a way to bring like-minded people from Cranbrook together. Over time, it's kind of evolved. We have a mission statement. Our mission statement is to grow a family of Black alumni from Cranbrook Kingswood, committed to aiming higher than individual success, nurturing future members, and preserving our legacy of excellence and service. Now, if you listen to that, that sounds very similar to a lot of the aim high, go forth and serve stuff that a lot of us have gone to Cranbrook to learn. What we all have in common is we have a love for Cranbrook as an entity, but also a very strong connection. So Blackbrook in general has two objectives. Number one is to figure out the best way to give back and contribute to a school that we're compassionate about. And that's why we wanted to contribute here in this forum. We feel that there's a bit of ownership that happens at Cranbrook once you leave, and we are committed to making sure that Cranbrook graduates of color who leave feel like there's a part of the Cranbrook experience that belongs to them. And that's not just in the school, that's the entire ecosystem. So we're actually working hand in hand with AC, the president. She works with us and a lot of our strategic people to figure out how do we do a better job of getting more involvement and having the picture of Cranbrook and the story of Cranbrook tell our story. So that's number one. And the number two piece of what Blackbrook does is that we want to have something there ready for people who have been through a similar journey as us. So when they leave from those doors at Cranbrook, we actually have a community waiting there for you, a community that has political power, that has financial power, and that has a bunch of brain trust to be able to start new businesses, create generational wealth, and figure out ways to solve social issues and problems that we're all passionate about. That's the bigger vision of Blackbrook. And over this span of the 17 years, businesses have evolved, partnerships have evolved, friendships, and from generations that span from the 70s all the way to now. So we have over 50 decades of graduates of color that are a part of Blackbrook, and we're super excited about engaging and doing more with the Cranbrook community. I know that we'll talk about a couple things, but this is only the start. I want to give some special attention to Amber, who helped put a lot of this together, and also and Latanya Riddle, who was a big piece of contributes a lot to things on campus. But you'll see a lot more of us. We want to be there for you. We want you to know that you are not by yourselves. There are people out there that are passionate about, and I don't want to forget to mention this one thing. See, I can be long-winded, so I apologize. But Dr. Montgomery, he spoke about his experience at Cranbrook. Most of us have fellow Black Cranbrook friends that did not make it to graduation. I almost didn't make it to graduation for financial reasons. One of the things that we want to try to solve is we want to try to correct those types of problems. We want to identify what is happening there on campus, and we want to be a presence to help. So, and we're going to do that. So we look at all of you as future Blackbrook members. The moment that you come out, the first thing that I will do is say, come on in, and we want to help you to get to the next level. So that's what we do. They'll probably announce this, but you'll even see a presence with us on the reunion weekend. We plan on bringing a bunch of 4A people together. My group has actually documented the history of all the presidents going back all the way past when 4A first started to even when there was groups before 4A. And we plan on honoring those people this year. So we're really excited. If you are a 4A person right now, you are lucky because you are here at a time where we've never been more passionate about giving back. That's all I have to say. I talk too much sometimes.
Well said.
Very well said.
Okay, so I guess I'll take over and read the 4A mission statement, as well as a little thank you and a wrap up. Thank you for introducing Blackbrook and giving everybody an idea of what Blackbrook is. So our 4A mission is to build a community by sharing and connecting the African American experience, both historically and present day, with the needs of our student body. And I'd like to give a huge thank you to everyone who helped put together today's event. Sydney and Kayla for helping to introduce the guests and moderate. Ms. Post, Ms. Hightower, and Blackbrook for doing a lot of the behind the scenes work. And for all of our alumni guests for taking time out of their day to share their stories with us. We hope that all of you enjoyed today's experience and receive inspiration on carving your path in the world we live in. We plan on hosting another panel sometime in the spring as another opportunity to show off some of our alumni like we did today. And lastly, thank you all for tuning in, taking time out of your evening to spend with us. We wish you all happy holidays, and we hope to see you at a 4A meeting at the start of the new year.
Thank you all for organizing this. This was great. This is really good. And good luck with final exams, because that's coming up. So
Thank you.
You got this.
Thank you.
Well, outstanding job. Congratulations. Sydney, Kayla, Brandon, outstanding job. Thank you so much. You guys really had a really wonderful evening. I think it was powerful and just meant a lot to everyone. Everyone had a different perspective of how they connect with 4A, and I think that you connected with all of them. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I was coming up with those questions.
Congratulations. You guys should take this on the road.